its way back home to the Bernabeu for an 11th time. Nobody else comes close.
This is a team of superstars, but a team that has immense backbone.
The History Boys, the Fantasy Club, have gone and done it.
Hello and welcome to the latest video cast, which I think is this week's name for this particular product. We give it a different name. We give it a different name each week. But for this one, we are looking at our latest club edition, These Football Times magazine. And this time it is Real Madrid getting the TFT treatment. I'm delighted to say that joining us, we have the usual suspects, Mr. Stephen Scragg. You right, Stephen?
Well, Stu, how's it going your end?
Not too bad, still warm, so I'm still all right.
Okay.
Talking of warmth and weather, Gary, obviously it looks pretty sunny where you are, or someone's shining a light in your room.
Yeah, it's actually, the sun does set over there, but it's actually been quite cool today, in fairness. It's been a few scorchio days, but today's been a bit cooler, but, you know, yeah, I'm not complaining.
Oh, well, that's good.
Glad to be talking about football again.
And then, best to last, our Spanish football expert, Mr. Euan McTear. Euan, you okay?
Yeah, good. Glad to be with you guys. You said it so confidently there, the title of this, that I believed you that's what you've been calling it all along. But
we've called it a vlog. We've called it.
Now I'm doubting. Now I don't really know where I am, what I'm taking part in, but I'm happy to.
This boy will believe anything.
As we've just entered June, for June, it's a video cast for the first week of June. Guys, the Real Madrid magazine, obviously you've all contributed once again. We've got 14 articles. It's got on sale already. It's been incredibly popular. The cover is outstanding. The cover that's been designed for it. Hopefully people are watching and listening have got it. I can't promise that when this goes out, that it's not too late to buy it, but people were warned. So we won't hang about. First of all, Stephen. No, we'll start with you, Gary. Your article. Who have you got with?
I've worked on Raul, one of the iconic players of Real Madrid of the sort of, I guess, past 15 years or so. A local boy from San Cristobal in Madrid, who became a local hero and became, the totem almost of Real Madrid for so many years, leading to massive success. And found so many interesting things about the guy in the article, and I recommend people to read the article and the other articles in the mag as well, of course. Fascinating story about him that I didn't know so much about.
It's funny. I mean, we're going from one icon, and there's lots of icons in this magazine. We cover a whole range of them. We're going to go through a few of them, but Euan, if you'd just like to share with us who you chose to write about, please.
Well, it's Sergio Ramos, who obviously had to be front and centre in this magazine. If you're writing about Real Madrid, contemporary Real Madrid, you've got to focus on Sergio Ramos. And specifically, I wrote about all the things that he does that he's remembered for that isn't defending. He's a defender by name, by trade, but he does so much more than that. Sometimes he'll be accused of not even doing defending, but he brings so much more to the table as a captain, as a leader. He started out as a right back. He can score goals. He can take penalties. He can get himself sent off. He's remembered for so many things as well as defending, and that's what I go into in the piece for the magazine.
I thought for a minute you said there that you and all the things you said that weren't offending, but it was defending. So okay, that's fine.
Well,
that's part of the idea of the article, is that Ramos is more offensive than he is defensive, and you can take that word in many senses. Many people do, but he's a character. He's got his own Amazon Prime TV show and everything. So he's Mr. Celebrity, Mr. Captain, Mr. Real Madrid, Mr. 93rd minute goals. He's Ramos, and we've all missed him. I think during this coronavirus period, it's been weird not having Ramos coming up in the front and back pages every couple of days.
He is a character that's incredibly difficult to ignore, shall we say. Stephen, we'll come to your article in a little while. You've not written about a specific player, you've written more about an era, but I suppose I'd like to ask you your response, first of all, on Sergio Ramos, just briefly, and then maybe a little bit about Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, he's in the magazine as well.
Yeah, polarizing is if you look in the dictionary, there will be Sergio Ramos and Cristiano Ronaldo possibly as well. But yeah, Ramos is one of those. If you've got him on your side, then you absolutely adore a player like that. He is Dick Dastardly in a football kit if he's against you. What can you say about the man? He's achieved absolutely everything he could possibly do in both club and international level, and behind everything, the whole pantomime about Sergio Ramos is a fantastic footballer.
It's funny. Sorry, just one sec. I was going to come back to you in just one sec before we go on to Cristiano Ronaldo. In terms of Sergio Ramos, Euan, how is he viewed? Well, I suppose how he's viewed in Madrid, then how he's viewed in the rest of Spain. But I do like to talk about legacy, and I'm quite interested in where you think Ramos's legacy will lie.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because, in Madrid, obviously, he's adored by Real Madrid fans, but not by Atletico fans, same in Barcelona. But across Spain, he's generally respected and admired because of what he's done with the Spanish national team. He's been captain for so long. He's set the appearance record for Spain. He's contributed to all the successes. There's an interesting stat, actually, I'll give you this one for free that comes up in the magazine. Ramos has scored 21 goals for Spain. He's never scored at a tournament. He's never scored at World Cup, a European Championship, even a Confederations Cup. He's never scored there. He scored in so many friendlies and qualifiers, but he's never quite scored in a tournament. But his impact in all of these tournaments was so huge. You look at a player like Gerard Piqué, who's compared to. Piqué wasn't there in 2008. Piqué came into the fold for the 2010 World Cup. Ramos has been there all the way throughout. Some of the players who were at Euro 2008 had faded and retired by the time 2012 came along. Ramos is one of those rare players who was there for all three of Spain's 3-in-a-row triumphs. And that means that he does have a great legacy across Spain. There will be certain fans of certain clubs, Barcelona, Atletico, even Sevilla, the club he left to go to Real Madrid, that don't particularly like him. But a lot of people respect him. And when he wears that red Spain shirt and the captain's armband, everybody, well, apart from maybe the Catalans and Basques, when I say everybody, it always comes with a couple of asterisks, but most people in Spain root for him when he's playing for Spain. And of course, many Spaniards are Real Madrid fans as well, all across the country, so they love him too.
Excellent. Talking of polarising opinions then, Stephen, obviously, sorry, I got sidetracked by wanting to make use of the expert. But Cristiano Ronaldo, I suppose, again, equally polarising perhaps with regards to how he is viewed in Madrid, in Spain, outside of Spain.
Yeah, he's beaten over by Lionel Messi, isn't he? For this era, if we're being honest and putting our cards on the table, Lionel Messi is the greatest of the era, if not all time. And then there's Cristiano Ronaldo. The thing with Cristiano Ronaldo is there's always that argument over style over substance, but with Ronaldo, it's substance as well as the style. The style comes first because it hits you in the face. That attitude, that arrogance almost, well, not almost, it is. It's exactly what it is. And he's a character that's hard to like if you don't love him. He's one of these that either it's not hate, but it's love, or it's a kind of tolerance almost. But I don't think there's anyone on the planet that or if they do, it's simply out of sheer tribalism to say that Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the greatest players ever to grace a football pitch. But at the same time, there is something eminently dislikable about him for a great deal of the globe, I'd probably say.
Obviously, like I say, we've got 14 articles in the magazine, and I think over half of them are looking at individual players and individual characters that have been at the club. And I suppose, I'll come back to you, Gary, not because you're the oldest, but because you're the oldest. And Di Stefano, we have a piece on Di Stefano, and again, with contemporary football, with the likes of Raul, Ramos, Ronaldo, Zidane, there's plenty of names. But if you think back and if you look back to the history of Real Madrid, the importance of Di Stefano cannot be overemphasized.
Absolutely. Just before I answer, just to say that I live in a different part of Spain to you, and I live in the Costa Blanca, and around here, Real Madrid are the most popular club. by a country mile. I mean, we're only probably an hour away from Valencia, but you know, when they go to local bars and the games are on, when Real Madrid are on, the bars are packed in the local bars. So they are the most popular club in certainly this part of Spain as well. But so just go back to Stefano. Yeah, when he arrived in Spain, there was initially a big issue between was he a Barcelona player or was he a Real Madrid player? And I've read so many things about this and written so many things about it as well. And the fact that he ended up at Real Madrid rather than Barcelona almost adds a little bit of extra luster to the way that the Madrileños remember him. But you know, this is a guy who was instrumental in the domination that Real Madrid had in the first years of the European Cup. And you know, this wasn't a win one and miss out, get to the final, and then win another one. They were on the bounce 5 times. You know, they were far and away the best team in Europe, and a massive part of that was down to Di Stefano. And until he died, he was always he stayed with the club as a ambassador and director of football and virtually so many other things. But this was a lifelong connection between a player, an outstanding player, and Real Madrid.
It's like I say, there's so many names. There's so many great names that we can talk about. I mean, within the magazine, we've also got Fernando Redondo, and I suppose coming to you, Euan, they could have picked, we could have picked 20 names to go into this magazine. Obviously, Omar's the editor. He decides how the stories knit together, how the stories link together, and perhaps he might not necessarily have been one of the first names that you would assume would have got his own piece in this magazine.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of says it all about Real Madrid, doesn't it? That it's about the names, it's about the individual players. That's what this club has been so based on over the years, is signing the best players in the world. So many of the players that we discuss in this magazine in their day were the best player in the world. In their day won a Ballon d'Or or something similar. So it kind of sums it up. It's not so much about philosophies of play. It's not even so much about the coaches, even though they've had very good coaches as well. It's about the star players, because that's what Real Madrid is built on. Go out every summer, bring in a star player, find a way to fit them in with the other star players who are already there at the club. And that's summed up best by the Galacticos era, which of course has an article in the magazine discussing how that era worked and also how it maybe didn't work, because they didn't win as much in that era as you would think. The couple of seasons when you had Figo, Zidane, Beckham and Ronaldo all together, they won one Super Cup and that was it. It didn't always work, but it was fascinating to watch. It was entertaining for the fans. It was like going to see the Harlem Globetrotters. You were seeing the best of the best. You were seeing a show. At the end of the day, did they win as much as they maybe could have? Who knows? But Real Madrid, throughout the history, from Di Stefano to the Galacticos to even last summer signing Eden Hazard, have always been about let's go out and get the best player available. And that's why so many of them deserve an article in their own right in the magazine. I mean, 14 articles, it should really be 13, shouldn't it? Because that's a number associated with Real Madrid right now. But maybe by the time people get to this magazine, start reading it, they'll have won their 14th. So maybe Omar's just thinking ahead.
Maybe that's it. He's quite an insightful guy, to be fair. Maybe that's it. Stephen, before we, as you just mentioned there, the Galacticos era, and there's Figo, Kaká, Ronaldo, Beckham. There's so many we could have done. And another one that's made it, and I think it's Will who's done this, or Chris Weir, I think, who's written about Guti.
Yeah, he was just one of those players that held it all together for them, wasn't he? The Galacticos era is just, it's success. It's success more than it's success, I think. Vicente Del Bosque did a marvelous job trying to placate all of that, to seemingly have another player thrown at him every summer and saying, well, look, integrate him into your team now, and then there'll be another after another after another. Players like Guti, and there were others as well, Makaleli, Jeremy was another one, Steve McManaman, that Del Bosque would be so enthused by, and he would base his squad on them, basically. He would have them as the anchors of the squad, and then everyone else would come in, including the Galacticos, and they would float around these 3 players, and Guti was one of those, and to survive for so long at Real Madrid. You don't do that unless you are not just a player of substance, but to have the personality and the perseverance to be able to do that. Not an easy thing to do, and probably one of the most under-celebrated of the Real Madrid legends. And you have to call him a legend for what he did and for how long he was there. And again, another fine player that is kind of overshadowed by so many other players that he played around.
I mean, like I say, when we get into these things, and the more I listen to you guys speak, the more frustrating I get as to how restricted we are by time because of all the things that go on. And I suppose, I mean, again, we keep coming back to the magazine, and and this is what this is about. It's just a real sort of taster of what we're doing. But also, we've talked about the players, but the managers. We could almost do another magazine just about the managers that have run through there as well. And I suppose if we start with Zidane, I'll come to you first, Euan, because Zidane obviously overarches contemporary Real Madrid, both as a player, and as a manager. It's 3 in a row as a manager, which in the modern era is phenomenal. And I suppose again, like I said, I'm very big on legacy, but in terms of Zidane, has Zidane stepped out of his own shadow as a player and created a new one as a manager, or is he still remembered as a player who just happens to be not a lucky manager, because you can't win 3 Champions Leagues and be lucky, but that kind of scenario, if you like?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's won more now as a manager than as a player. So in that sense,
That's unbelievable.
He's done a good job of trying to be remembered as a coach as much as a player, and it's hard to supersede that legacy he created as a player. But that's something a lot of Real Madrid coaches have had to deal with, because as well as signing the star players, they love a star coach as well. They love a former superstar player. You look at Del Bosque, he was great for Real Madrid when he was there as a player. Then you look at some of the other managers they've had over the years, also great players, guys like Ancelotti, they've had Capello there, even Jose Mourinho, who didn't make a name for himself as a player. When he came, he was probably the most famous, most high-profile manager around at that time. So they always love to have a star name in the dugout as well, and Zidane obviously fits that bill. And when they don't have maybe the star name, even someone like Rafa Benitez, who's won Champions Leagues, he's won La Liga, a guy who is a very, very good manager, you could say a star manager, he didn't come close to the level of stardom you need in the dugout to be able to control that team. The same with Santiago Solari, who came in, Julian Lopetegui. You look at the managers who have success at Real Madrid, at least in the modern era, it's players that were excellent players in their own right, or who have already built up the coaching CV to command the dressing room. You have to go way back to guys like Miguel Munoz, who were more famous for being a coach than a player. But when you look at the managers of recent times, it's a lot of star players who have moved into coaching, and they can tell the players, they can tell Luka Modric. There's a story of Benitez was telling Modric not to hit the ball with the outside of his boot, and Modric looked at him thinking, well, what do you know, Rafa? Zidane tells Modric how to pass the ball. I think Modric is going to listen to Zidane because he can still pass it. You see it in training. His first touch hasn't gone.
It's funny, actually, you touched on Mourinho there, and I was going to come to you, Gary. Obviously, you have first-hand experience of Mourinho at Chelsea and what he brings to a club. But in terms of his time at Real Madrid, how would you define his time at Madrid?
Mourinho's like a tornado. When a tornado hits your house, there's lots of flashes and bangs, but when he leaves, it's a right bloody mess. And I think that was very much what Mourinho does at a lot of clubs, and Real Madrid is probably no exception. And Euan's right what he says about managers at Real Madrid. When you manage at Real Madrid, you don't need to be. You haven't got to teach a player to trap a ball, and you've got to inspire players. You've got to inspire world-class players, and to do that, you've got to have respect. And if you haven't got that playing pedigree like Zidane has, that as you mentioned, and Del Bosque in the past, then you've got to have something else. And Mourinho brings a pedigree of success, and that's the inspiration he gives. And when he has this thing when he goes to a club, he's got to pick on somebody. And at Real Madrid, I think it was Casillas, who was a well-respected player, a hero of Real Madrid. But it's almost like, when you go to a new business, you've got to pick up the big guy and knock him down to show you're the fastest gun in town, the new gun in town, the big boss. And Mourinho has this reputation. That's what he did at Real Madrid. And, he probably got success. They won the title. I just don't think Mourinho was a Real Madrid type of manager, type of coach. It was always going to be a short-term thing with Mourinho. And the players, I suspect, perhaps, I wouldn't say feared him, but it was a different kind of respect than they had for coaches such as Zidane and Bosque and Munoz.
It's funny. Another name that's just struck me there, obviously listening to Euan. Another name that struck me is Capello. Now, Capello to me, from an outsider with limited knowledge, certainly compared to you guys with regards to La Liga, but Capello just seemed an odd fit with Real Madrid to me. His manner, his demeanour, the way he approached the game. When as you mentioned, it's like watching the Harlem Globetrotters, and Capello was just like the old 1950s school headmaster. That it just seemed like two colliding worlds. For you, Stephen, just as a slightly different perspective on the manager they've had, but how would you rate Capello's time at Madrid?
Well, it was a success. At the end of the day, he delivered what he was meant to deliver. Maybe not a European Cup, but he won the Liga. What more can he do? But he's one of these coaches that if you hire him, you know what you're likely to get. So, Real Madrid couldn't have been under any illusions over what type of football he would deliver. But Capello was always in the business of delivering trophies. And that was what he was all about. There was a degree of, underappreciated expansion to, you only have to look at his AC Milan taking, Johan Cruyff's Barcelona part in the 94 Champions League final for proof of that. His teams could play football, but he was first and foremost about the result. He was first and foremost about gaining the trophies and winning the day. That's everything to him. He came from that Italian era that was ingrained with the basis that, it's all about winning first, and then if you can add the style second, then fine. But upon occasion for Capello, maybe there's no time for the style, before the success came. And Real Madrid is such a unique position to be in as the coach of Real Madrid, is that you have to deliver both the success and the style. But, probably similarities and parallels that can be drawn with Mourinho. You know exactly what you're going to get, and, you pay a price for employing a coach like that in a respect, and the price that you pay will sometimes be the style of football.
We'll come to start, and again, just as you were talking, as Gary mentioned, Casillas, another name that that we could have had in here, we could have mentioned, and I suppose really the next bit is a little bit about eras, I suppose. We've briefly touched on the Galacticos, but I would like to go back to the Galacticos. Like I said, there is an article in there, and I'll come back to you for that, Euan. But to begin with, again, I'm really sorry, Gary. It's not an age thing, although it probably does feel like it, and I am really sorry. But that, you touched on those first 5 European Cups, and a lot of the Real Madrid legacy was embedded so early on in competitive European football.
Yeah, it was. They were the original aristocrats of European football. It's a case where other teams afterwards, like Benfica, Inter, the Grand Inter of geez, what's his name? Oh dear me. Somebody help me, the Argentine coach. Herrera. Afterwards, they also had periods where they were the best team, but not for so long. And Real Madrid had that sort of fallow period for a while. They came back and did it again and did it again and did it again. And, no team, no other club has come even remotely close to winning as many European Cup / Champions League, whatever you want to call it, the Premier Club competitions of Europe than Real Madrid have. Not even close. Some clubs have had a period of domination. Liverpool have, Bayern have, Ajax have, Inter have, AC Milan. But nobody's ever come close to Real Madrid. They are the original and long-lasting aristocrats of European football. There's no doubt about that. They're a premier club in the continent.
It's funny. I will come to it at the end with regards to your perceptions of Real Madrid as a club. But in between, obviously from there, those early days of European football, almost the pioneering days, if you like, of the European Cup. And then before we get to the Galacticos, this almost apparent fallow period. And I guess, Stephen, your article in itself, covers the 1980s. And when you look at what happened earlier and what's happened subsequently, almost in the new millennium, and it seems not that they're an unrecognisable side, but in terms of success, it's an unrecognisable club.
In terms of European success, yes.
Yeah.
But in terms of domestic success, there was never a greater eye of the storm than there was between them winning the 6th European Cup in '66 and then winning it in '98. They went 32 years without winning the big one, so they had their own, that was their fallow period. In terms of European success, there was still a couple of UEFA Cups in there. They reached and lost a couple of Cup Winners' Cup finals, but the big one, the European Cup, always remained out of reach for them. Lost to Liverpool in the '81 final. There was a host of semi-finals, especially in the late '80s, which my article covers quite a bit of. But yeah, domestically, they were imperious. They would win league title after league title. Look through the '70s and the '80s, certainly the second half of the '80s. They dominated those 5 in a row that they won between '86 and '90. That's my favourite Real Madrid era. We were talking an era there where we didn't really get games live in the UK, but there was a great influx of British players to the Spanish game at the time, particularly Barcelona. Steve Archibald went to play, Gary Lineker, Mark Hughes. They all went over. So there was an interest in Spanish football in the UK. Saturday afternoons on kind of like Football Focus or On the Ball or Saints and Greavesy, you would get goals roundups of the Spanish games, but they'd show the Lineker goals of Barcelona, and then they'd say, well, here's what Real Madrid had been doing. Here's what Real Sociedad had been doing, because John Toshak would be the coach and the emerging Deportivo. So you will get to know these teams and these players, and that Real Madrid side. Hugo Sanchez, his airplane celebration was always a standout thing. But it was the probings of Michel, it was Butragueno, it was Martin Vasquez, Quinta del Buitre. They have me fixated. When Barcelona would come up short, I'd be quite delighted by it, because it meant that it was a really good Real Madrid, and it was that Butragueno side that was doing so well. But yeah, throughout the '70s, they dominated domestically. They had this mad first half of the '80s where they missed out, particularly 1982-83 under Di Stefano was the coach, where they lost absolutely everything. The title by a very narrow margin. They lost the Copa del Rey final, the Super Cup. They lost the short-lived, even lost the very short-lived Spanish League Cup final, and they lost the Cup Winners' Cup final to Aberdeen. So they had this huge kind of like era where they constantly missed out. And it kind of started with the European Cup final in '81, and then it escalated through the following seasons. Eventually, it came to a coach called Lewis Maloney, who was a hidden kind of character for Real Madrid. He played for them. He came back in a technical capacity and was asked to babysit the club in the wake of some high-profile sackings when Miguel Munez was pushed aside. In '74, he was brought in. He was brought in again later on when, I forget his name now, Milanic, I think it is, he went as well. And again, there was another one after Di Stefano. So three times he came in, and every time he won something. It would be a league title. It would be a UEFA Cup. He constantly put the club back on the straight and narrow for someone else to take on. And yeah, this era of success that they had still continued. And the interesting thing for me is that since they won the last of that 5 in a row in 1990 under John Toshak, there's only been one occasion that they've retained the La Liga title. They've had these eras of success. They've come and won like a league title. I think it was under Capello, actually. He had 2 in a row in the 90s or the early 2000s. But they did, since they've become this mega entity in Europe again, they've been overshadowed domestically by Barcelona. So there's been a kind of a flipping over of the roles there. But yeah, that 70s and 80s period, or throughout the 70s and the second half of the 80s, they were just domestically supreme.
I mean, following on from that, I suppose, Euan, you mentioned the Galacticos era, and we've rattled off some of the names that were involved there, and it was almost the policy that it was big signing, and even now, you talk about Eden Hazard last year, but that Galacticos period, do you think we'll, Hazard is there, but do you think we'll ever see it's like again? Certainly, either at Real Madrid or at another club in Europe.
Yeah, it's harder to build a Galacticos kind of team now, isn't it? Because there's more big teams than there were back in the day. You've got PSG, Manchester City, even Tottenham in the Premier League. So much money. There's just money all around Europe now. So there's more bidders for the best players. A player like Kylian Mbappe 10 years ago, he'd already be at Real Madrid. He'd be a veteran in the squad by now. But there's so many big teams that also want these kind of players, and Real Madrid are going to have to fight for them financially and to appeal to them to come to Real Madrid. And I think they still have that. It's a club that has that appeal that players want to come there. They want to come to Real Madrid because of the prestige, the history. And I think they can still bring players, but to bring a superstar signing, best player in the world every summer it's going to be difficult. And it's going to be interesting to see what the fans feel about that, because they've become so used to the Galacticos. But going back to the era Steve was talking about, you speak to Real Madrid fans of the right age, and the team they loved the most was that team of the late 80s, the Quinta del Buitre. That was the team fans remember most fondly, even though they didn't win the European Cup. The year they all broke out, those 5 players that Steve's written about at the same time, the year before that they were all in the B team, and 80,000 people went to the Bernabeu to watch a B team game, and I think it was 1983, and they won the second division that year. Weren't allowed to be promoted, obviously, but all the players then got promoted to the first team, and they started that period of dominance that Steve talked about. But the fans loved that era. They saw these players come through the academy. They saw them from a B team game at the Bernabeu with 80,000 people to winning their 5th league title in a row. The fans love that team. They love that it was homegrown. So maybe if Real Madrid do have to turn a bit more to the academy in the future, maybe fans will like that. Fans do like the homegrown players. Some of the players coming through the academy, they're the ones that are the most loved. They love a superstar, but they love to combine it with an academy player. And it goes back to the original Galacticos project. The idea was Zidane's and Pavon's, and it was Zidane was a superstar signing, Francisco Pavon was a youth team player, and the idea was to complement each superstar with players from the youth team. That didn't quite work out, but now that Real Madrid's academy is so much better, one of the best in all of Europe, you look at the number of players they have around Europe's 5 major leagues. No other club has more players from their academy than Real Madrid. So they produce a lot of B-grade players maybe that go and have a good career in the first division of a certain league. They don't maybe produce so many A-grade players that make it to the first team, but more and more they are starting to do that. The academy, they've done such a good job there. So maybe in the future they have more players from the academy and they can sprinkle in 1 or 2 superstars here or there, the odd Mbappe, a Haaland, and combine that with the players from the academy. And then, of course, I think the other thing we maybe should talk about if we're talking about Real Madrid's future is their policy recently of signing the best young players in the world, bringing them in at 16, 17, 18 years of age, putting them in the academy in the B team for a couple of years, and then bringing them through, hopefully having the future Ballon d'Or winner before he's even won the Ballon d'Or.
It's brilliant. I mean, talking about La Fabrica, and there is, like you say, it has its own article in there, and it's something, like you said, maybe that isn't necessarily associated, but is quite often overlooked with regards to Real Madrid, and quite how many quality young players they do actually provide, like you say, around European football. Maybe not necessarily first team at Real Madrid or La Liga, but certainly in terms of the production of quality footballers, it is a very successful academy. With regards to, obviously, as always, sort of times against us, guys, but I think, we're on to, I think this is the 10th or 11th, I think, Club Edition magazine. And it's taken us this long to get to Real Madrid. And I don't want to say that we were reticent to do Real Madrid, but we were a little reticent to do Real Madrid. But but we went there, and and rightly so, and as we've mentioned, such a huge iconic club in European football, in world football. But in terms of what they mean, or what they are, or what they stand for, I'm quite interested in all of your opinions as to what your perception of Real Madrid as an institution is. Gary, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was one of the advocates for doing the Real Madrid magazine because they are, to my mind, the biggest club in the world. Simple as. I think a lot of the what's the word I'm looking for? Perhaps reluctant or thinking it might be a great idea was because they're not loved by people as much as perhaps Barcelona are. And perhaps that's because of the style of play. Perhaps that's because they're perceived as being buying success. Perhaps that's because of historical things, but because people's perception of the Spanish Civil War going back even farther. There's lots of reasons why that might be the case. However, what's indisputable is that they are the most successful club in European football by a country mile. And as I say, certainly where I live, in the area where I live in Spain, not far from Alicante, they are the most popular club here. No, we're nowhere near Madrid at all. And they're almost seen as like a quasi-national team when they compete in European competition. I'm sure the people around here, I'm not sure it's across Spain, but I'm sure it's true in a lot of areas across Spain, people would rather see Real Madrid win the European Cup than Barcelona, or perhaps even Valencia, because they are seen to be the almost like a quasi-national team for the Spanish. They wear white rather than red, blanco rather than rojo, but they're pretty close aside from those colours, and they have the appeal of having lots of star players, but also as you had mentioned earlier, we touched on a couple of players who came through the academy, Guti, for example, and Raul, who I did work on. He actually originally went to Atletico, but he was left there because Jesus Gil decided to close their academy down, and then got a club to go to. He ended up at Real Madrid. What a stupid mistake that was! It's supposed to be a cost-cutting measure. My God, how much money that cost him? But anyway, so I think Real Madrid are the iconic Spanish team. They are the iconic European team, and fully deserve to have a magazine devoted to them.
Brilliant. For you, Euan, I mean, you're in Spain, same as Gary. And I guess you have firsthand, on a daily basis, you'll see it in the press just how dominant Real Madrid are, as like I say, as an institution, as an entity within Spain.
Yeah, absolutely. They're the most successful club in Spain and in Europe. On the pitch, they've won more than anybody else. They've won more league titles in Spain. They've won more European Cups than anybody else. Off the pitch, they're the most valuable club in the world. A new article came out this week ranking them as the most valuable. It's almost boring, these kind of articles, because Real Madrid are always top. A couple of years, maybe Manchester United pip them, but Real Madrid are almost always considered the most valuable, the richest club in the world in the money leagues as well. So they're just the best, biggest, most successful club. And then also there's an element of just so pristine, everything with the white shirt, just everything is very, very simple in terms of the branding of Real Madrid, because they don't have to splash out on a mascot. They don't have to have a funky club hymn. The success behind them does it for them. You even look on social media, when they're signing a star player, they're not doing a reveal video, an announce video, or anything silly like that. They're just putting Comunicado Oficial, and that's the way Real Madrid operate. Simple, because they did the talking on the pitch from the 50s, even before then, up until as recently as last year.
And I suppose finally to you then, Stephen, do you think, as Euan so eloquently put there, do you think that that's what it is about Real Madrid? It's about success. It's almost that business-like approach to the game. It's about success. Nothing else matters. We produce talent. We can buy talent. We try to get the best coaches, and and we just keep repeat.
Yeah, they demand the best. It doesn't always work out for them, but that notion never veers anywhere else. There's something hypnotic about Real Madrid. Yes, as Gary said, they're not universally loved by supporters of other clubs, but there is I think there's very much almost a silent appreciation of them. You know, I think people think more of Real Madrid than they ever care to mention. You know, they are, when push comes to shove, the benchmark for everybody else. You know, and as Euan said, there's no need for mascots. There's no need for, you know, razzmatazz. There is no need for add-ons, because, you know, the minimalist approach is perfect for the club they are. You know, there is this concept that we are Real Madrid and this is how we do things, but it's not. I don't even think it's done with an arrogance. It's just done with a very sure-footedness, and yeah, they are the biggest club in the world, but they're not. They don't do it in an image-conscious way like some other football clubs do.
It's a great way to finish. You know, it's a great way to conclude. And, you know, as Gary said, you know, I suppose, you know, Gary was an advocate for the club, and it was certainly a club that we couldn't ignore once we'd gone down the road of club additions. Real Madrid was always, I'm pretty sure, was always going to be a club that would get the treatment. Like we say, it's 14, you know, quality articles from quality writers. It's the photography, it's the art that's involved. As we talk about all the time, it's the smell of the magazine as you open up that cardboard envelope, and the smell just wafts out. It's all part of it, and like I say, I think it's right and proper that Real Madrid have had this treatment and have had the club treatment. And, you know, again, the last thing to mention just before we go is that, even if it's just for the front cover, if you only just buy it for the front cover and place it on your bookshelf, not on its end but on its front, it's a work of art in itself. Just the cover of it. Guys, thank you ever so much for this week's video cast. Euan, like we say, this is what it's called for now. Next time you're on, probably something different, but we'll keep you in touch. We'll let you know if the name changes or anything. If you invite you to another one and you wonder what it is, it's just one of these with a different name. Gary, as always, thank you.
Yeah, absolute joy. Can't beat talking about football with your mates.
Stephen, thanks ever so much.
Joy as always, Stu. Joy as always.
And Euan, like I say, thank you for just being the resident expert that we all need in our lives.
No, thank you. I've learnt so much from Gary, who, as you've made out, was there in person the first 5 of these European Cups. That's the impression I think we've all got. So I need to thank Gary for giving that insight from those matches there, that he saw the first 5 of them.
Being Di Stefano's right-hand man. I know. I am sorry, Gary.
I'm going to follow my pension book in a minute.
I know. I am really sorry. Yeah, let's finish it there, I think. Cheers, guys. Thanks ever so much, and see you again soon.